This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your friends with a pussy magnet.
Welcome, welcome, my lovely lumps. Or maybe let's go with lovely labs. That's pretty on brand. Anyway, I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge. We're going to be yarning about all things sexuality, intimacy, womanhood, relating, holistic health, and everything in between. We're going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up because you're about to receive the sex ed that you never had and hopefully have a bit of a chuckle while you're at it. Before we get stuck in, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. It's a massive privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content in Naarm, and I just want to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if you're ready, let's flap and do this.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up the couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
Hey gang, just before we jump into this episode, I wanted to offer you an opportunity to access my new mini course for free before I start charging for it in future. It's for people with vulvas and it's quick to complete. It's all about demystifying the female body and pleasure anatomy and getting some basic fundamentals to understand your body better. It's called Pussy Pleasure Secrets, Your Roadmap to Bedroom Bliss. You can grab it on the freebies page of my website or in the show notes. It's a great little free resource to kind of dip your toe in or act as a bit of a taster for my work. So if you've ever been curious about this sort of thing and you just don't know where to start, or you want a really quick, easy, accessible, non-threatening way to get the ball rolling and start working on this stuff, this is a great place to start. Hello, my labial lovers. Welcome back to the lounge. Pull up a clip cushion and get comfy with us because we are talking about fascia today. And I've got a really incredible and knowledgeable guest, Deanna Hansen, who's the founder of Block Therapy, which is a groundbreaking fascia decompression practice that helps people release pain, improve circulation, and restore the body's natural alignment and vitality. And I am no expert, but I do nerd out a little bit on fascia, and I've actually done an episode with Anna Ray from GST Body that was sort of talking about fascia and her from her lens and expertise. And that episode's called The Role of Fascia in Pleasure and Pelvic Floor Health. But I'm really excited. That's kind of my only, other than studying yoga teaching with some pretty outdated, literature at the time. That episode with Anna has been my main exposure to like the more modern science around fascia and the knowledge that we have now. And obviously there's some different ways that you can use this knowledge of fascia. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, Deanna. How are you going?
Oh, really good. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure, treasure. So I guess just talk to me a little bit about, it'd be remiss of me not to ask you about how you got into it and your background and what sort of made you specialize in fascia.
Great question. So I've been in this sphere now for 26 years, and I was 30 years old when this journey began for me. But in my 20s, I really lost my way at the age of 18. And I started with really negative behaviors and a lot of things that took me into a very dark time and space in my 20s. And at the same time, I was training to be an athletic therapist in Winnipeg in Canada, which is very similar to physiotherapy, except focusing on elite athletes. So, was learning all of the things that I was supposed to be doing for what I thought was a healthy and fit body. And yet I was spiraling into this other direction. So I was knowledgeable enough to get through university and learn everything that I had to learn. But my own personal body was going into a very dark moment in time. I was 50 pounds overweight, struggling with anxiety, depression, chronic pain. And I really just had no positive outlook toward life. And my personal world was in absolute chaos. So at the age of 30, I made some changes. And amidst these changes, I started having these severe anxiety attacks. But it was this one attack in particular that was really the seed of everything to come. In the moment, I actually thought I was going to die because I was so frozen in fear I couldn't catch my breath. But for some reason, I intuitively dove my hand into my abdomen. And this was where I stored the majority of my extra weight. So I was very ashamed of it. So now I'm diving my hand into this space, which I had never really touched nor let anyone else touch. But the first thing I encountered was pain, which was actually shocking because I avoided it all the time. So now I'm feeling pain, but the pain brought me out of my mind, brought me back into my body. And I'm aware, okay, I'm breathing. This is fine. And then I started working intuitively with my tissue. And what I felt was what felt like scar tissue marbled throughout my abdomen, even though I hadn't had any injuries or surgeries. And as an athletic therapist up until then, I always focused on deep tissue work. So I was very aware of what scar tissue felt like in a body. But now I'm feeling it in this space. And I'm thinking like, no wonder when I'm coming home from a 5-mile run, dripping wet with sweat, my belly would still feel cold. There was no energy getting into this tissue. So the first evening, I worked probably 30, 45 minutes. And what was really noteworthy was how calm I felt, because that was so not my norm. I woke up the next day, I was a little tender, but that actually kept me really focused. So I'm working on my patients the next day, and I'm very much in my body now. And I'm just excited to get home that evening and go and dive back into my abdomen with my hands. After the second night of doing a similar thing, I stood up and I felt taller. And I went and I looked at myself in the mirror, and my belly was flatter than it had looked in years. And you have to realize, like, I'm extreme with most things that I do. So when I was wanting to change my size and shape, I was doing 400 sit-ups a day, running, Tai Bo, aerobics, weights. I mean, you name it, I was doing it. And the harder I worked, the more compressed, ballooned, and toxic I became. I was also starving myself. I mean, like I was doing nothing which is appropriate and healthy to create positive change, which I now understand. But either way, I was working so hard, and it was like, suddenly, why are the rules of weight loss not applying to me? I'm eating little, I'm sweating like a fiend every day, and I'm actually getting bigger and more toxic. So this was such a revelation in that moment that within 2 days, I'm seeing positive change. So this became my nightly routine. After I'd work on my patients, I would come home, and within 2 weeks, my chronic low back pain was going away. I was always leaning forward on a massage table and working, and my back and my neck became really problematic as well. In my past, I was a Highland dancer. I was a provincial volleyball player. So all these things created postural issues that, accrue as you age. So here I am creating all these positive changes in my own body. So then I started working on my clients, my patients, in a very similar way that I was working on myself. And within a few short months, I started attracting other therapists that wanted to learn what I was doing because I was getting such amazing results. And so that was, again, 26 years ago. It was a couple of years in before I recognized I'm actually working in the fascia system, not just on muscles and ligaments like we're trained to work on. I was diving into a very different layer of tissue and understanding. And yeah, that was the seed of it all. So
Wow, that is so epic. Oh my gosh. Very cool. Very cool story. I'm super glad I asked. And it doesn't surprise me that back then, especially in the field you were in with elite athlete, conditioning coaching, all this sort of stuff, like especially back then, all of the knowledge we had and all of the research was all done on male bodies. Like it wasn't applicable to cyclical female bodied people that had, hormonal fluctuations with the menstrual cycle and things like that. And everything we understood about exercise, physiology and optimizing, was so misguided when you tried to just like transplant that straight onto women. Same with weight loss. It's like we just didn't understand. And I mean, a lot of people still don't, but I think there's a bit more awareness nowadays about, what actually is super unhelpful. And so it's not surprising that in that time where it was very like yang kind of gung ho, just keep pushing, like, push yourself to the limit. Everything that you were doing was actually just causing your body to want to hang on to that weight more than anything. And just super fascinating that the fascia was like this sort of key that unlocked all of it and just brought enough kind of flow and energy that you were able to start shifting things. I want to, I guess, give people a bit of an overview of, I mean, I assume everyone knows what fascia is by now, but I guess we should probably just give them a little quick rundown in case they haven't heard my other episode about this. And maybe just like, yeah, from your perspective, like how do you see fascia? Why is it so, so, so important? Like, why do you feel like it's the be all and end all of this stuff?
Oh, I just love this question. So I literally see fascia as being the cell membrane of every cell, connecting every other cell, whether bone, muscle, tendon, fat, skin, all of it, organ, everything. Everything is innervated by this beautiful system that has all cells communicating with each other. And there are many things that make up the fascia, but there's two main proteins: collagen, which creates the structure, and elastin, which allows for movement. And when these two proteins are in balance, the goal and the optimal way to live is to have every single cell perfectly aligned. Because if that's the case, there's optimal space for flow of nutrients into the cell, flow of toxins and debris away from the cell. So that's the perfect scenario. And if there's optimal flow, there's really no issues in the body, even as we go through time aging. But that's not our reality. We are constantly being pulled down toward the earth by gravity. We're dominant on one side. We have an accumulation of trauma, injuries, possibly surgeries that have added up to create our specific system in our body. How we use our body every day. Are we physical laborers? Are we in front of a computer? Do we play a sport, an instrument? All these things really create the patterning that determines how we age. So what happens with this balance of collagen and elastin is, imagine I'm sitting in front of a computer slumped over for decades. So that structural piece, that collagen, migrates to areas of need to create structural balance so I don't fall flat on my face. But that also acts like scar tissue, blocking flow. It creates this compression and ballooning in the body, holding past tensions, past traumas, again, holding all the toxins, and it creates ultimately cells that are starved and dirty. So just imagine how you feel when you're starved and dirty. You don't function as well as you should. So when we create the space in the body that we lose over time, we get shorter and wider as we age. So what we want to do is we want to go backward through time in the scenario and create that space so that the cells can get pulled back to their proper alignment and get rejuvenated again. And so that's what this work that I share is really all about. It's taking us in the opposite direction to what gravity does, to what time has done. And when we do that, it's a cleaning out of the past, of our old ways, our old system, and we start to repattern the body so that it's used appropriately so that we can thrive instead of really survive. If I can dive into 3 parts of this that will help to bring more clarity. So basically, we compress over time. So that's fascia compression. That creates the shortening, the shortening and the ballooning of the body. So fascia decompression is the work that I teach. And there's 3 parts. It's creating space, which we do with the process that I teach, inflating that space, which we do with teaching proper diaphragmatic breathing, and then maintaining that space, which we do with teaching people proper postural foundations. So we want to use the body the way the body was intended to be driven, but we weren't given instructions early on. So we simply live our life and we do what we do without really recognizing the long-term effect this will have, because most people consider aging is normal. But the way that we age and the opportunity to change the game in how we age is very at our fingertips when we start to understand the fascia and we really have the tools and the opportunity to move the body backward through time.
Yeah, and something that sprung to mind then is the way that we're using our bodies in modern times is just so bad for us and so unnatural. And I can't talk. I mean, I've got practically a hunchback at this point. My posture's so terrible. I've had costochondritis for about 10 years, which is this chronic pain in the sternum. And it's so painful to open out my chest and breathe properly that my whole posture has been kind of crunching in on my chest for years now. But something I was thinking of is I had a chat with a friend recently who's a nurse, and she was telling me that because, like, in her time as a nurse, she's seen this shift because we're all using our phones constantly and our heads are down and our sort of shoulders are caving in, we're sort of slumping and slouching. The way that they intubate, like put tubes down patients' throats and stuff. They've had to come up with different methods because the shape of their esophagus and their like neck and everything has changed. Like we're literally changing our physiology as people because of modern lifestyles. Do you have anything to add to that? Do you see this having a massive impact? Like, do you still feel like there's hope and that we can use your methods to undo that damage?
So first of all, absolutely, there is hope. And yes, it's probably been 23 years where I've been mentioning if something doesn't change, the younger generations are going to be gone before the older ones because of this compression, because we need space. And they're coming into this world now from the mothers that grew up in front of technology. Babies are coming out very differently. And in yoga, they talk about the signature posture, how we're born in this lifetime with a signature posture. And the goal of this lifetime is to break through that signature posture. So I see that as we are born in this lifetime with our mother's breath. And what we want to do is we want to repattern the breath, because if the mother is stressed coming out, that is going to create a stressful breath from the get-go, and then life comes at you. And that's what we're seeing with the youth. They are completely different in how they look, how they move, how they function. It was interesting. There's a movie called It. It's a horror movie. It's a Stephen King movie, but it was from the 80s. And then they did a remake in 2016. And I went and I saw the original one, and then I went and I saw the other one, and it was pretty much the identical movie. And what was fascinating was, of course, they have the 80s hairstyles and the 80s clothes on the 2016 kids, but the posture was so crazy. Like everybody was so twisted and pulled forward. And I came home and I pulled up the cast from the 80s and put this one side by side, and they are not the same bodies at all. They are so incredibly different. And that's the issue. It's this lack of foundation. So the diaphragm is really the key here. This beautiful plate of muscle that rests right below the rib cage, when it's working properly, it does a whole bunch of things. It gives the organs, the heart, all of the things in this space a continual massage to bring energy into this very important space. But it also creates a solid foundation for the rib cage and everything up the chain. And I remember when I was a kid Highland dancing, how many times I was told to hold my belly in, hold my stomach in. So you do that, and then you're forced to breathe through the muscles of the upper chest. But now we've created this weak foundation. So now what's going to happen is we're going to start having the rib cage collapsing into the core. And now the tissue has to go somewhere, and it's going to go outward. So all of those efforts to flatten the belly by holding it in and breathing through the muscles of the upper chest eventually kind of bite you in the ass, because, now you're creating this dynamic in your body where you don't have the strength to support your body in proper ways. And it gets intermingled with the limbs and everything. There's cause sites to the issues, but yeah, the youth are in trouble, and it's very sad to see, but this is a solution. And that makes me very happy to know that this can change, and it changes people very quickly. And it's very simple to do. And you get to do it in the comfort of your own home, because it's just a matter of getting the program. We ship you the tools, the Block Buddy and the Block Baby. So these are the tools here. And then you just go through the process, and it literally starts to repattern how your body is held and locked, so we can create new patterns that are supportive to health and healing.
Wow. Well, that gives me hope, because I've been despairing about the state of my body and my posture and pain and things. And I also do body work, so I do massage and stuff, and I'm kind of noticing the strain that puts on my body. I was actually going to talk about this obsession with sucking in our stomachs and trying to look thin and have a flat stomach, because I know that, as someone who's studied yoga teaching and done a bit of breath work and who works with pelvic floors, I do pelvic floor massage. That is like the worst possible thing. And I'm always telling clients like, oh my God, you've got to stop sucking in your tummy and stop like clenching your core. And something that I loved about Anna Ray's movement programs and classes is, she's very much like, just let the belly hang out, like stop that, let it develop its natural strength and flow without just locking it all in like you're wearing a freaking corset or something. And I know that it's like pretty terrible for pelvic floor health and sexual function. Do you have any, intel from your experience around how our culture is always trying to suck in our tummies and hold our bodies in a certain way to look aesthetically, appealing according to modern beauty standards, and the effect that that has on sexual function and the pelvic floor.
Yeah. And I mean, I was such a perfect example of this because that's what I tried to do. I tried to hold everything in, and then it just creates, because the diaphragm isn't working, it gets patterned into the limbs. And when I'm looking at a body, I always look at the feet because the feet are the furthest from the engine. So this is where the adhesions will grip and lock us into our negative alignment with the most crazy strength and power. So we can do all the work in parts of the body that we want, but if we don't understand and change the dynamic of the feet, every step we take is going to cause us to get pulled back into that twisted forward alignment that's going to create so much tension in the pelvic floor, which is going to take away the space for flow. I mean, whether it's male or female, if we don't have blood flow to these organs, things aren't going to function properly. And we might, men might have issues with getting an erection, but for women, dryness, it's the same thing, right? And pain. So it's all the same thing. And it's really coming from those adhesions getting in the way of that flow. But we have to look at where they're happening in the body. And I mean, I think back to how I felt when I was so heavy, and also because of my family, and the idea that, you're most beautiful when you're slender. And what does it mean if you're not? So then there's this whole mindset that comes into, wow, if I'm not the attractive version of myself, I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of feeling pleasure. Like, it all gets tied into your psyche, depending on where you're coming from. I mean, some people that might be overweight might feel beautiful and have abundance that way. But for me, with my conditioning, that wasn't the case. And it really impacted my whole psychology of what I was worthy for. And I felt I wasn't worthy for love. And then that ended me going down a very deep, dark path of negative relationships, negative behaviors that added up to be, really dark at the time.
Yeah. Sadly, such a familiar story, like our self-worth being so attached to our physical appearance, and with beauty standards the way they have been in our lifetime, if you are quote unquote overweight, it's a fast track to feeling unlovable and unworthy, and making decisions based on that lack of self-worth and confidence. Something I work on with my clients all the time. Yeah, it's really heartbreaking. So thank you for sharing that, because I can just acknowledge what a difficult time that would have been, especially when you're young, like in those formative years where you've barely figured out who you are, and what your purpose is in the world, and like what value you have to share other than what you look like. It's fucking crazy how vulnerable we are to those types of like narratives around beauty when we're in our teens and 20s. It just sets us up in such a toxic way, and it's really sad. And very, very common, unfortunately. When you brought up the feet, I was like, oh, that's funny. I'd actually forgotten, but I did an episode with Dr. Emily Splickle. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's like a really turbo podiatrist. And we did an episode called How to Use Foot Health to Level Up Your Sex Life.
Oh,
so
cool.
It's funny. I'm like, I've done a fascia episode. I've done a foot health episode. It's like, I actually love this stuff. And, I sort of talk about myself being a holistic sex coach and educator, and you've got to be, like, all of this pelvic health stuff and pleasure, and even the ability for your erectile tissue to become engorged, and for you to feel pleasure and orgasm, like, these things massively impact it. So foot health is a big one. I remember in my yoga teaching and my yoni mapping therapy training, when I did like internal pelvic release training, there was an expert that came in and talked all about feet, and how that is literally where everything begins. It just starts from your feet and moves up. So I love that you mentioned that. I'm wondering, like, from your lens, like what does the anatomy of fascia have to do with sexual health that I haven't kind of already mentioned, or can you dive a bit deeper into that? Like, maybe people aren't quite aware that they're related. Hey, baby babes. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to pop my head into the lounge here and mention another virtual lounge that I'd love you to get around. It's the Labia Lounge Facebook group that I've created for listeners of the potty to mingle in. There you'll find extra bits and bobs like freebies, behind the scenes, or discounts for offerings from guests who have been interviewed on the podcast. There'll also be, hopefully, inspiring, thought provoking conversations and support from a community of labial legends like yourself. My vision for this is that it becomes a really supportive, educational, and hilarious resource for you to have more access to me and a safe space to ask questions you can't ask anywhere else. So head over to the links in the show notes or look up the Labia Lounge group in Facebook, and I'll see you in there. And now, back to the episode.
Yeah. So when we have healthy fascia, fascia is fluid in nature. It's lubricated, which is what we want our sex organs to be as women, for sure. When our fascia is not healthy, we become dry and dehydrated in that tissue. And that's going to be what's going to cause pain and friction in a negative way. And all of those things that create irritation because we're not getting that flow to those organs, to that tissue. And again, we're also not getting the removal of toxins. So that adds up to create other problems. It can be uterine cysts, fibroids, endometriosis. I mean, all of these things basically are occurring in the body because we don't have optimal flow in the fascia itself. So that's so key. And again, like we just have to think of adhesions being like slow moving versions of scar tissue building. And so we've got these roadblocks for flow. And if there's roadblocks for flow, then again, if you're getting stimulated, but you don't have the ability for that blood to get there, then it's just irritating and frustrating because there's that dryness and it's very uncomfortable. And so when we can really support our fascia health and understand how to breathe properly diaphragmatically and get that blood and oxygen to those tissues, then it's a game changer for what's going on in the body. And it's interesting because I actually, 2 years ago, now, I did a video that went viral called Death Starts in the Feet. And it was a fascinating video because I had just come back from a yoga retreat, actually, and it was a great retreat. And one of the things she said, which was so wonderful, was that your toes are the eyes of the feet. And at the time, I was teaching people how to release the webbing between the toes because when we get patterned, I always look at the feet and what's going on. And there's always one foot that's kind of like a flat tire. Think of driving your car, your right front tire is flat. It's pulling the body away. And then the opposite side of the body goes into anchor mode so that we don't fall forward. That patterning, though, creates the twisting up the chain and creates the tension within the core and the anterior pelvic tilt and the twist. And that's just creating all of that hardness right in the center of our being. And so then inside the pelvis, now your ovaries, your uterus, they're getting impacted because you don't have the space for them. And then again, we're not cleaning things out properly. So all these other things can happen as a result. Even the inability for the eggs to drop down the fallopian tubes, because that's basically scar tissue getting in the way of flow. So when we really understand all of the implications of having a fascia system that isn't properly supported and aligned, and we then have a system to recognize what's going on and support people on the path out of that direction, it's really amazing because we can really change anything that's gone wrong with patience and persistence.
Oh my God. Well, that's something that everyone's kind of in short supply of. And that's the tricky thing with like everything I teach as well. And even like tricky to get myself to practice things regularly. It's like having the patience and being consistent with it. And we're so obsessed with like having a quick fix or some sort of like, magic bullet solution nowadays. And we're so used to getting that instant gratification or that sort of immediate result that I think people have lost a bit of the patience and the capacity to really stick with things, even just our attention spans are shortening. Like so much about the modern lifestyle and the modern habits that we're in are so detrimental. And even though I know this and I've got my eyes wide open to it, it still affects me daily. And it's like an uphill battle to resist those things and not fall into those habits.
If I can share, because part of the reason for that patterning is because of our nervous system. And so the really cool thing with this process, we always start in the core and the rib cage, because even the rib cage gets twisted and locked, keeping our diaphragm locked from full use. So even if we're doing breathing work and we haven't changed that dynamic, we're only accessing as much as we have available. With this work, we create more of that diaphragm to access so that the breath becomes that much more powerful in the absorption of oxygen and the removal of toxins. And the very first class, most people feel it right away. And it changes the nervous system to be more parasympathetic. And we should be in parasympathetic about 80% of our day. Most people are in sympathetic almost 100% of the day. So that's the cool part. As soon as you dive into this and you start spending that time, and it's slow, and you do it lying down, and it's so incredible how quickly people's nervous system changes, that keeps people going. And then you start to work the rest of the body, and you start to feel the lightness, the openness. And the cool part is no matter what brings people to the table or to the block, whether it's how you look, how you feel, how you function, past trauma, it does all of it. Anti-aging, it's part of all of it, because it's all about putting the space back into the body that time has taken away. And so that you're actually taking out those layers that burdened your entire system over time. And this cleaning out, it never ends. I'm 26 years in. And I mean, from where I was in my 20s, I'm 56 now. I don't think, first of all, I'd be alive today if it weren't for this work, because again, of my crazy life that I lived, but also just the continual moving in through the layers and pulling up those deeper, older traumas so that we keep cleaning out the closet. And it's a never ending, beautiful journey. And I've got such a large community of people that are literally addicted to it, because it's so simple to do, but so profound in the benefit. And because you get to do it in the comfort of your own home, you can even do it lying in bed if your body isn't able to get up and down off of a floor, or even seated in a chair. So it's so accessible and so profound that most people that actually take the moment to feel it, they're hooked.
Yeah, and I love what you said about it just automatically giving you more capacity to then form better, healthier habits and keep going. The fact that there's all of these, I guess I think of it as like roadblocks in the body, like in the fascia where there's adhesions or places where there isn't a lot of flow or there's some, constriction. These are all sort of roadblocks. This would obviously have an effect on fertility, like you were mentioning with the fallopian tubes and things like that. And I wish there was and maybe in future there would be some sort of body scanning technology where you could literally see all of your fascial networks and see where there's adhesions and the areas you need to work on the most. That would be so cool.
I think the best actual representation of that would be a thermography image. We have people that have shared their thermography images and the difference in where the heat and the cold shows itself to be.
Yeah. Cool. And I also loved, when you were talking about the nervous system, I was like, oh, this is another reason that it would be so amazing for, everything, but for sexual health and pleasure, because we need to be in the parasympathetic nervous system for our erectile tissue to become engorged, for us to go through the cascade of arousal processes that give us access to orgasmic states, especially as female-bodied people. So if we are, and some of the most common bits of homework that I will give clients and a massive part of my online course, it's all nervous system work. It's okay, we are all so sizzled. Everyone's in the sympathetic all the time. Everyone's stressed as fuck. Biggest killer of libido, biggest killer of pleasure and orgasm, stress. And so a lot of the work that I do isn't directly, sexuality focused or genital focused. It's teaching people how to feel calm and relax and get into the parasympathetic nervous system when they've almost lost the ability to tap into that at will, and for their resting state to be in the parasympathetic. So I love this. I'm my brain's ticking. I'm oh my God, I've got to get hold of some of these blocks. I've got to introduce it to my online course participants. This could be a really pivotal piece for so many people, because it's sort of working on the physical, the energetic, the emotional, there's so much, like, and we'll get to the emotional and energetic in a second, but I can see the potential here being very holistic. And
If I could
on
share a
that,
little bit about that too, just because
yeah,
this is such a great moment to talk about the
yeah,
diaphragm a
yeah.
little more. So, when the diaphragm is working optimally, we can feed the body up to 6 times the oxygen. That's 600% more oxygen. And every function in the body, first and foremost, needs oxygen to actually allow it to happen, including an orgasm. So when we're breathing through those muscles of the upper chest and we're depleted with oxygen, the body goes into survival mode, and everyone's living in survival mode for the most part, right? So an orgasm isn't necessary for survival. Neither are, skin cells on your face or, having warm hands and feet. Of course, that oxygen is going to get directed to the organs, the brain, the heart, the liver, all the things that keep us alive. So when we can change that dynamic and we can start to bring the air more deeply into the lungs, and it's at the base of the lungs where the majority of the oxygen receptors reside, the alveoli. So when we're breathing like super shallow through the mouth, we're not pulling that air deeply enough into the base of the lungs to actually have that absorption. They've also shown 84% of weight loss comes through proper exhalation. And that was me, right? I was doing the starving. I was working out like a fiend. I'm getting bigger. It's like the rules of weight loss aren't applying to me. What's going on? I was not breathing. I was not moving out the waste from my body. So the waste continued to accumulate as well as the carbon because the CO2 wasn't getting released effectively. And also what's really cool, and I love James Nestor's book because he goes into great detail about the CO2 in the body. When we really focus on that slow exhale compared to the inhale, and I've been teaching for 25 years, we want to exhale for a longer count than we inhale. I always say it's like you want to take the stuff out of the closet before you put your new wardrobe in. So what it does though, that slow exhale, it increases the carbon dioxide in the body, which is the currency for the oxygen to jump from the hemoglobin into the cell. So there's this whole process that the body understands if we're breathing properly, how to take care of itself. But because we haven't been given the instruction on how to breathe properly, and because by nature, the reaction to pain, fear, and stress is to reactively hold the breath, we are all living in this upper chest breath, fight or flight mode. But that can be undone. But it does require those adhesions to remove from the rib cage so we can bring more of that beautiful muscle into activation so we can start feeding every one of our cells. And when that happens, it's just this beautiful moment in your body where you suddenly recognize, wow, I've got this. And the pain fear cycle, the fear gets taken out of the cycle because pain is simply a message of the body. It's a message of the cell. It's like the baby crying. So you wouldn't throw the baby crying like out the door as much as we want to like mask the pain. But if we look at the pain as what the cell is trying to share with us, it needs something. It needs love. It needs attention, hydration, rest, nutrition. It needs something. Instead of us saying, you know what, I'm going to numb you. I'm going to mask you. I'm going to posturally avoid you. We move into it and through it on purpose. And then you get all of these positive results on the other side, especially moving through that pain. And then the fear gets taken out of the pain fear cycle. So now pain is simply a sensation that gives us information that we have an action step to overcome. And it changes your whole mindset around what pain actually is. Because most people are terrified of pain because we've been ingrained to believe that it's a bad thing, but it's not. It's the baby crying. Like that's a necessary thing. So to love pain on purpose and know what to do with it, it's a game changer for how we live this life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a signal, it's a barometer, it's information that is helpful if we know how to listen and inquire. Um, I'm sort of thinking about how much this could be helpful and effective for people who suffer from anxiety as well, like we really our posture these days, from being on phones, from sort of collapsing in the chest, from sucking in our tummies, everything's working against us being able to take like a full breath. And yeah, I guess like my next line of questioning is around the less of the well, it's all very connected, but less of the physiological effects and more like, what about emotional and sort of sexual memories or trauma or baggage that we're holding on to or trying not to feel or sort of suppressing? Do you feel, obviously so many people have stored trauma in their tissues and sort of stored emotions, and a big part of the somatic work that I do with internal pelvic massage is helping facilitate emotional release and release of traumatic energy, creating space in the tissues for there to actually be flow and for things to start to come up and out. How do you see this affecting people on that like emotional, energetic plane?
It's such a beautiful process because when we start to open up the breath, so think of a deer who survives an attack. The deer shakes. So the negative energy comes in and then the negative energy leaves. Where we as humans, we lock it in and then we hold it and then we age from that place going forward. And that locking mechanism also ties into the brain. So when we're breathing through the muscles of the upper chest, we're living in a frequency in the brain that is stress-based. It's fight or flight. When we're breathing through the diaphragm, we're living in the moment. We're living in a relaxed brain frequency. So you can be in the most relaxed environment, but if you're breathing up through here, your brain and your body are in stress mode. And that's the thing. You can be in a very stressful situation and you can be breathing diaphragmatically and your internal world can be at peace. So when we have had a trauma, sexual or otherwise, and we lock in, we end up disassociating parts of our body. And that's what ultimately those adhesions do. So I lock in, I'm in pain, I avoid, I suddenly change how I walk, I change how I sit, I change how I function in my life, I change how I think about myself. All of these things get tied into the same dynamic. And then the locking in just continues to reestablish that negative patterning. I might walk into a room and where before I might feel confident and attractive, suddenly I feel like really scared. And then I pull in even further and it adds even more and more and more to that. So through this process of opening up and releasing with that exhale, we're tapping into those deeper areas that we've disassociated from. We're bringing them back to life by melting those adhesions, sending blood and oxygen through that powerful diaphragmatic breath into those spaces. And then those cells absorb that oxygen, they start waking up. And then we also teach again how to bring your posture back into being. So it's this beautiful process where it's not top down. We don't have to relive a trauma to bring it up to the surface to say goodbye to it. We simply have to open up the areas in the body that have held that negative energy and allow it to let go and release. And then some people have emotional healing crises where suddenly they're crying for what they think is no reason, or they're suddenly very angry, or nightmares come to the surface, or memories come up to the surface. But it's this very beautiful letting go because you feel it let go. And then you create space for new. And so it's this journey of continually going through the layers. And we have such a beautiful supportive community. And that's probably one of my favorite parts of this whole journey for me is I have a private Facebook community group called Block Therapy Community where there's well over 20,000 members now. And when people go in and ask questions, you're being answered by not only my moderators who are trained in this, but also the community of people that have done the work. And I have a 90-day trauma program, and one of the experts that I was interviewing, she made a comment saying, like, we heal with community, and that's absolutely it, because the fears that come to the surface when you feel, and I'm sure you see this all the time, when you see that people are communing and talking about things together and realize they're not alone in this tragedy, there's a level of beauty that comes into the space, and we can heal from that.
Yeah, beautiful. Well said. So you often talk about how like blood, lymph, flow of these things and energy is very vital to overall health. And I'm curious about like how fascial flow influences hormones and libido. Also maybe like things like PMS or, painful periods, endo symptoms. Yeah, like let's chat a little bit about reproductive health and how fascial flow can influence hormonal balance and all of those related things.
So this is again really where I look at the feet Because again, if I've got a foot that's getting pulled away and then the other one is anchoring, our hip joints should be sitting directly in line with our feet. So when you look at somebody standing, very few people are standing in Tadasana, right? Like with mountain pose. Most people have a leg splayed, the other one, whatever. Some people are standing with both legs externally rotated and far from center. So now imagine what that does up the chain to the pelvic floor. Imagine what's happening inside the pelvis to the organs. If my hip joints are supposed to be here, and now there's all this twisting, what's happening to everything inside? They're getting crunched. They're getting blocked from flow. So debris, toxins is getting stuck and stored when we're supposed to have our menstrual cycle and we're supposed to be releasing all of the tissue. If we don't have the ability, because we're not posturally aligned for gravity to assist that release, then we go into cramp mode because the body's saying, you're supposed to leave. But we've got this dynamic with this anterior, often pelvic tilt and twist. It's not able to just come out of the body effectively. So then the body has to work really hard to try to push it out. And for some people, that's just excruciating cramps. I used to have them. I was a Highland dancer, trained to turn out as a kid, plus a provincial volleyball player, created major twisting in my pelvis. So I used to have very painful periods. And so that's really what happens is when we don't have alignment, all of the support of this life, like gravity in the positive way, which is here to support us, it's not working on our behalf either because we are so twisted and locked in. And the fascia the adhesions will grip and adhere to bone with a force of up to 2,000 pounds per square inch. I mean, it's an incredible force. This is what's going on inside the body all the time, which is why you can sit up straight for a moment, but the second you aren't thinking about it, you get coiled right back into that alignment, but it's magnetic. So when we understand how to release the magnetics, which is what this journey is all about, then we can open up those spaces, get life flooded in, and we can clean out the tissue so everything is flowing optimally.
Wow. Okay, I have to do this because, I have a lot of trouble keeping my posture correct. It's literally like 2 seconds before I get distracted and it just crunches back into the way it's been for years. What about, actually, if you feel comfortable and ready, shall we do the segment Get Pregnant and Die, where we talk about an anecdote from your sex education?
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise?
I actually don't really remember having much sex education. I went to a private girls' school, and my education was I was a late bloomer. All my girlfriends, hit puberty, had breasts long before I did. And I was kind of an ugly kid. Like I had braces, I had freckles, I got a really bad haircut. I mean, I was boxy looking, so I wasn't the feminine girl that like all the guys wanted. So, again, that was where my idea of unless you're beautiful, because that was my experience. And in fact, I actually had a male friend, like in grade 7 or 8, and I had a crush on this boy that he knew. And I said, do you think he would like me, or do you think I'm too heavy? And he said, maybe. And I'm like, like those little hits. Maybe you're too fat for him. Maybe he won't like you because of this, like all of those things. And I mean, it was obvious that of course the guys are attracted to the pretty girls, and I wasn't the pretty girl. So, it hit me like a wave, with suddenly I'm a little older. I became anorexic. So, starved myself for a while, and suddenly I became more attractive, oddly, but that's the way things go. And, I ended up not having a very normal relationship with men. So private girls' school, I had a wonderful father, but he was a worker. He wanted a son. I was the third and last girl. I had no brothers. I had uncles that I had no connection with. And then both my grandfathers had passed before I was born. So I didn't have a lot of that male proper role model. And then when I was 18, I started working in a bar. And, I'm a pleaser. I wanted love. What do guys want? Well, they want sex. So you know what? I gave it up real easily and way too quickly, thinking that it would be to gain love. And of course we all know where that goes. So the idea of, give people what they want, that can bite you in the ass.
Oh my God. I know. And gosh, like women really cop it with the conditioning around that, around self-sacrificing and putting others' needs first, putting men's needs first, especially. And then you add into it the sort of like, patriarchal, heteronormative sexual scripts that we get handed down and modeled to us. And it's like, no wonder. Like, again, sadly, such a common story. Most women I speak to, it's almost like this sick rite of passage, that so many women go through when they're seeking love and worthiness. And we think that the only way to get that is sex or through our bodies conforming to a specific, beauty standard. And that's the way we're going to be noticed or valued or respected or desired. And it's just, it's heartbreaking, like I was saying earlier. But I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's got to be one of the most relatable experiences for listeners.
Which is sad, but
which is so sad, which is why I'm in the job.
Right, fair.
Yeah. It's sort of my whole jam. It's like trying to combat that.
And thank God for you.
Yeah, thanks. Excuse this quick interruption. I'm shamelessly seeking reviews and 5-star ratings for the potty because, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, it's pretty fab. And the more people who get to hear it, the more people I can help with it. Reviews and ratings actually do make a big difference to this little independent podcaster. And it's really easy to just quickly show your support by taking that simple act of either leaving 5 stars for the show on Spotify, or even better, writing a written review and leaving 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts. Or if you're a real overachiever, you can do them both. That would be mad. If you're writing a review, though, just be sure to use G-rated words, because despite the fact that this is a podcast about sexuality, words like sex can be censored and your review won't make it through the gates. Lame. Anyway, I would personally recommend doing that right now while you remember, just to get on top of it and let me know you're with me on this journey. Thanks, gang. Enjoy the rest of the epi. Talk to me about scar tissue, because I'm thinking of like C-sections versus vaginal births versus like a lot of the things that I see when people come and they've got, imbalance in the pelvic floor, or they've got numbness or pain during sex, or they can't orgasm, a whole host of difficulties and challenges that can come from having a big scar. I'm assuming that is something that you work on specifically, because obviously scar tissue is different, but very much, starts to adhere to things nearby and pulls the fascia into it. Is that a more tricky, more dense type of tissue to work with and create flow? Because I know scar tissue, once that's laid down, it's very dense. It doesn't allow, blood flow or capillaries. There's, less collagen. Or, things like that. So how do you work with scar tissue and things like that?
So it's interesting, because scar tissue from a cut or an actual injury in the moment. Now, if we don't heal it in a way that's actually supportive to fascia health, now we get this big scar, where adhesions is like a slow moving scar throughout the whole body. So sometimes the adhesions can be so traumatic, because if we have a body that's not breathing properly and we're falling into these spaces and these patterns, the adhesions can create, like, sometimes legs can like literally feel like concrete, like there's no blood flow in them, and that's the adhesion. But the scar is like an actual beaver dam right in the road. And but either way, it's still the magnetics. So I have a very different approach to healing injury. So as an athletic therapist, of course, we're trained with the RICE method: rest, ice, compression, elevation for injury for 48 to 72 hours. That's what you do after an injury. However, that never made any sense to me, because first of all, you now have this gap. And the second law of thermodynamics is nature abhors a gradient, which means if there's a gap in the system, nature's going to fill it in. So let's say we have this big cut. What's going to happen is all the surrounding tissue, the collagen in that surrounding tissue, is going to dump in to that space to create the scar, causing everything else around it to get pulled in. Now, if we approach that scar differently, then what we can do is we can actually teach the body how to rebuild it. Well, not teach the body knows how to do it. We need to teach ourselves how to address it. So inflammation is not the enemy, it is the gold. And in the first 48 to 72 hours of any kind of trauma, the body is directing all of this blood flow to rebuild the tissue, but we need to support it through providing energy, through heat, through movement, through pressure, through whatever means, depending on the situation that we're talking about. And then we can actually rebuild the tissue. But even if the scar has been there for a decade, decades, doesn't really matter how long, we can still move into that and we can shear the scar apart. So this comes back to the magnetics. When magnets are far enough distance apart, they have no attraction to each other, but bring them close enough together and they still seal with a force. Try to pull them apart, pretty much impossible, but we can shear them apart. So same thing in the body with these collagen proteins. When they seal together in this scar, when we dive in and we start to slowly shear through those layers with the breath, with intention, we start to pump blood back into that scar, life back into the scar, and it starts to release. We have so many people in our Facebook community. If somebody asked about the difference that block has done for their C-section, we have tons and tons of people that will share. It has created tremendous benefit to the point where they get that sense that these lower abdominal muscles are now working on their behalf because the scar basically takes that connection away. And then it also keeps adding up and building, as you mentioned, right? Like the scar keeps bringing more and more and more collagen in because gravity loves density and it's going to keep twisting and pulling us down. And then it gets riddled throughout the organs and all sorts of things. So to be able to shear through that layer and bring life back in, it changes everything on the surface as well as deep inside in the organs.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, we're all wondering about this method. And I know you talk about fascia decompression as opposed to maybe other approaches. What is involved and talk us through this method.
Okay, so I'll show the tools again. So this is the Block Buddy and this is the Block Baby. These are the tools that we use. So they are very
just for listeners, because this is a audio podcast, they look almost like this. Is that wood?
Yes.
Are they wood?
And the reason
Beautiful.
And they're very specifically shaped. So there's two sizes, the Block Buddy. We always say for people over 5 feet, the Block Buddy, for people under 5 feet, the Block Baby, but most people want to have both because I've got classes where we use both. Having both gives you the opportunity to fit one in a certain area where it might not fit for somebody. So it's lovely to have both, but they're made from wood and they're actually made from Winnipeg wood. We don't cut down the trees. The trees are already getting cut down because we have Dutch elm disease spread throughout our trees here. So these beautiful 100-year-old trees are getting cut down, but the issue is in the bark, not the wood. So we end up using this recycled wood and bring it back to life for this purpose of healing. Beautiful. But the thing about bone and wood are similar in density. And because those collagen adhesions will grip to bone with that 2,000 pound per square inch seal, we want to get to the root of the problem. And if we have something that's more porous in nature, like a fascia roller, where you're rolling on the surface, you're staying on those surface layers, kind of like taking a boat on the ocean. We need to deep sea dive. So these tools combined with the process offer the ability for us to dive through the layers. So we get in a position, we always start in the belly, so that we engage the breath properly. And we work head to toe throughout the entire body through a number of classes that we have in our programs. But we essentially stay in each position for a minimum of 3 minutes as we're focused on full exhalation through the diaphragm. So now what's happening is pressure over time creates heat. The diaphragm is like your body's furnace compared to the muscles of the upper chest, which is like a space heater. So when you start engaging the diaphragm, you're heating the body from the inside. Combine that with the pressure from the outside, and then the instruction on shearing through the layers of fascia so that we can melt through those adhesions and go deeper, deeper, deeper. We become very effective at melting those adhesions, releasing them, pumping life into new space newly created. And then again, the third component is teaching people proper postural foundation so they don't just fall back into those negative patterns that habits create over a lifetime. So that's really the process. The three parts: creating the space, inflating the space, maintaining the space. It's all about the space. And if we're properly aligned, then we have that opportunity for the diaphragm to function optimally. It's supposed to be sending blood and oxygen to every single cell. But if we're sitting contracted and compressed in one side, which most of us are, as well as forward in our alignment, then this diaphragm isn't able to move the waste out and pull the life in. So then again, we end up feeding what's necessary for survival as opposed to thriving. So that's the process, and it's very simple to do. It really takes no thought. You can do it on a bed, you can do it on a floor, you can do it on a chair. We make it so accessible and simple that you just follow the classes, and you get them online, and we send you the tools, and there you have the program.
And how much time per session, like each day, would be enough to be effective?
Optimally is 30 minutes, and that's what the majority of our classes are. But even 15 minutes a day for people starting, like again, if we do the abdomen, which we always do first, and train the breath, even that 5 minutes of lying on the breath and engaging diaphragmatic breathing as you're actually sinking the block deep into the abdomen, it changes everything, because again, now you're turning on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is required for healing, is required for orgasm, it's required for everything really good, sleep, the whole thing. So you start engaging your body in this beautiful way, and you start feeling those benefits immediately with the anxiety you had mentioned before. And again, for me, this started with my anxiety attack. When we have, again, the brain pattern in that parasympathetic state, we don't feel that anxiety. When we're feeding our cells what they need, they don't have to give us that sense that they're anxious. I always like using the example, if you're in an elevator and you're the only one in there and you're not afraid of elevators, you feel calm, you feel good, but put yourself in an elevator that's crowded and somebody has really bad perfume and two people are arguing and you're trapped and it's hot and you just want to get out. That's anxiety. That like, let me out. So that's what the cell is going to feel if it doesn't have the space to get what it needs and to feel clean and supported and all those things. So we're just basically an accumulation of all these little cells. And if we feel anxious, it's because they're anxious. And we expect them to work on our behalf, but we have to look after them in order for them to do that.
Wow. Yeah, it's wild. I guess it's commonly assumed that things like anxiety are very much all happening in the brain. It's very psychological, but the body is so intelligent and has such a big impact. When people talk about, because it's definitely become a little bit more well known and like it's a bit of a buzzword nowadays, like fascia release. What's the difference between, and you sort of touched on this, but just for people to be explicit about it, the difference between fascia release and what you are teaching, which is fascial decompression. Fascia release being things like the foam roller or whatever. And maybe even like, I'd love you to touch on massage for fascia release.
Yeah. And that's the difference. I mean, you can address the fascia, but to the depth that you're addressing it and the systems in place to make sure that the breath is engaged and to make sure that you're also engaging posture into the equation. A lot of fascia release techniques, again, like they're rolling on the surface. So you're getting to those surface areas, but you're not necessarily engaging properly, because to be thoughtful as you're moving into areas of pain, you need to understand the breath. And there's only two rules in block therapy. Number one is your breath is your guide. As long as you're breathing in a relaxed way, you are feeding and healing the tissue. If anything hurts, it's causing that breath to be stressed. That's your body saying this is too intense. So that's the very first thing we teach people is as you're diving into this work, you need to be thoughtful, because we're teaching you to find pain on purpose, to pull it up so that you can release it. So it's nice because everything is very slow and controlled. And when we're doing things that are more aggressive on the surface, we aren't in that same level of control. And that's part of it. We want to make sure that we're looking after this container. And when we do, it's a very different game. So what we're doing with the decompression is we are literally decompressing the areas that became compressed over time. And fascia release doesn't give you that same depth of shift and change necessary. And again, the third component being understanding how to now use your body properly. That's a key part of what we share as well in our teaching. So one of the things is, I mean, people are dominant on one side, and I used to be so right hand dominant, and that created such a twist in my body. One of the things we teach people is we need to start using our body more in a more balanced way. If I'm always picking up the cup with my right hand, let's make it a habit to pick it up with the left hand. Let's switch so that we're bringing balance back in, because if we always use one side, we're going to have a buildup on one side, and then we're going to have a weakness on the other side, and that's that driver anchor. And then we're going to have pain because we're going to have areas getting blocked. And again, cells are just going to give you a signal. Okay, I'm not balanced. You're squishing me. I'm not getting what I need. So now I hurt. And if that's not recognized and it keeps adding up, then it becomes chronic, then it becomes systemic, and then it becomes anything from an autoimmune disease to a cancer potentially, right? Like all of these things add up, because essentially if cells are dirty and undernourished, they're not going to function. And then other parasites and other things can come in and attack your body because it's ripe for disease if it's acidic in nature. So I think I spiraled into some different conversation here.
No, that's great. I love it. I'd love to hear if you have anything off the top of your head, like of a particularly miraculous or amazing success story, maybe some sort of effects or, like anecdotal stories from people that have done this work, maybe around things they've healed physically or like in terms of mental health.
I have such a list. What's actually cool is, and I'll just talk about it now because I've got this couple here from Australia. And so the woman, Billy, she is actually in my instructor program. She just got certified as an instructor in Australia, so you can find her there. And Brett, her husband, was in a horrific motorcycle accident 16 months ago and shattered pelvis, he just shared some really, really crazy stuff. I actually have already done 10 treatments with them, and I've got 8 more to go in the next 2 weeks. But shattered pelvis, brain damage, collapsed right lung, right diaphragm paralyzed, completely paralyzed right arm. And there's many other things involved as well. But this right arm was what actually brought him here. I was working with his wife for the last year on Zoom, giving her things to do, and she absolutely kept this beautiful man alive. And then I offered to have them come here and we would film the whole thing and create a documentary around this. I've got a number of people I'm doing this kind of work with. Wow. So it was fascinating because it was 3 or 4 days ago when I was working on him, and I didn't even know this because this wasn't part of his injury list. He said, I can see out of my right eye. And I didn't know he was actually blind in that right eye. He had optical neuropathy, which they say there's no cure for. Once those nerve endings are dead, they're gone. And I've been working a ton through this area because of all the stuff that's happened in this space. And he was able to see. And then another thing that's super cool was when he got here, he had not been upright for more than 5 minutes at a time. I mean, just lying on his back since his injury. Last Thursday was my staff Christmas party, and I said, you guys have to come. And he was up for 2.5 hours, walking, talking, having fun, engaging, like unbelievable the changes, just unbelievable. And I mean, this is just one of countless stories, but it's so profound when you understand, again, just how to melt through that scar tissue and get the breath going. Magic can happen.
Wow, that's so powerful. I'm obsessed. I love it. Do you see people with things like depression or PTSD noticing an impact?
Absolutely, because again, that hit when the trauma happened, it gets locked into the freeze moment of the breath. So as you start unraveling the body and you start opening up the breath and you start teaching that powerful exhale, you're moving the negative energy out as well. So absolutely, I actually have a 90-day trauma program that we put people through 3 years ago, and the results were phenomenal. And you don't need to do the trauma program. Just doing this work will open up your body to those deeper spaces and help people relieve all of that stuff. So that's, I think, honestly, probably what initially will keep most people here is that change of your mental state, because your breath determines your mental state. It keeps you patterned in the perspective of where you were before. when you start changing the breath, it starts changing your brain frequency and it starts changing your perspective so that you can then even go back to that moment where that trauma happened and you can see it from a different lens. And as soon as that happens, then there's this beautiful forgiveness and this changing of your entire crystalline structure, this beautiful liquid structure that we live in. We're not this solid body with all these parts. We are literally connected from head to toe. And when we become more fluid in nature, and then the light can shine in and out of us more freely, it just changes everything. So the amount of compassion and forgiveness that comes into this body from doing this work, it's so profound. And I'm so grateful that I get to be part of this with the world.
Wow. Well, that was bloody poetic. I love it. Yeah, I like my brain's popping off with all the applications. I'm like, oh, I work with people with vaginismus, chronic pain. There's all of these things. And even, eating disorders and this sort of disconnect with the body. I can imagine that this would be a really powerful practice to bring back in connection and compassion for the body. And
that's actually probably another just great thing to mention too, as you're lying on this and you're sinking more deeply and you're melting through those adhesions so that you access the cells that are deeper than what you're consciously aware of. That in itself is such a beautiful thing. In Greg Braden, one of his books called The God Code, he mentioned that on the surface layer of every cell is the actual name in the cell. God lies within. That's actually encoded in every single cell in the body. So when we've disconnected parts of our body from trauma, then we don't have access to all of the light and the love that we're here to share with the world. So as we start diving in and we start awakening those deeper cells, then we start connecting more deeply to what we're actually here to do, which is raise humanity, raise the frequency, make this world a better place. And I think we're ripe for this now. We've kind of hit rock bottom. And that's a beautiful place to be because we can't really go much lower. And I think the next number of years, we're going to really see the rise up of a lot of amazing healing modalities and the collaboration of people that are all here, like what we're doing right now, sharing with each other, because that's really what it comes down to. There's so many components and parts, but when we can bring it all together and let people know there's absolutely hope, my gosh, they can change the game no matter where they're starting from.
I hope you're right. I love that. Maybe I need to get some of my God cells decompressed so that I can fully believe that like you. All right, beautiful. We're going to wrap up. Is there and maybe this is just too tricky to do on an audio podcast, but is there like a really quick, like simple 5-minute sort of fascial decompression practice that people could even do maybe like before intimacy or sex, or just do like as a daily thing before they go to sleep at night that you would suggest? Or is it a little bit too tricky to kind of describe and just give like a quick 5-minute thing?
No, I totally, it's not a 5-minute thing, but I can do it in 5 minutes. So the toe work. So what we want to do is you would take a finger or a pencil and you want to push it between each and every toe for 3 minutes as you focus on that exhale and through the nose. That is going to create more space between the toes, and it's going to help bring that energy back so that when you're standing, and so then after you release all toes, and yes, that takes 24 minutes, but do it when you're watching a TV show or when you're whatever. I mean, just this is such a powerful thing to do. And then after you release them, stand, slightly bend your knees and grip the floor with your toes and focus on 10 slow exhales. Then you're going to be pumping up the tires to bring life back into your feet, which will take your center of gravity more onto your heels, which is going to help to align your pelvis and establish a better overall alignment. And then I would take a rolled up towel and roll it up nice and dense, and then you sit on it lengthwise. So the pressure of the towel while you sit on it, I mean, I'll sit on this block baby anytime. The towel works beautifully when you roll it up nice and dense. Sit on it for 3 to 5 minutes and allow your body weight to just sink into that towel. And when you take the towel out, you will notice that your sit bones have moved further apart. You're going to have more blood and oxygen in that tissue. And if you make that a practice, you're going to start to see some pretty quick transformative results.
Wicked. Okay, very cool. That's super easy and applicable. Hey, me again. If you'd like to support the potty and you've already given it 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on, I want to mention that you can buy some really dope merch from the website and get yourself a Labia Lounge tote, tee, togs. Yep, you heard that right. I even have Labia Lounge bathers. Or a cute fanny pack if that'd blow your hair back. So if fashion isn't your passion though, you can donate to my Buy Me a Coffee donation page, which is actually called Buy Me a Soy Chai Latte, because I'll be the first to admit I'm a bit of a Melbourne cafe tosser like that. And yes, that is my coffee order. You can do a once-off donation or an ongoing membership and sponsor me for as little as 3 fat ones a month. And I also offer one-on-one coaching and online courses that'll help you level up your sex life and relationship with yourself and others in a really big way. So every bit helps, because it ain't cheap to put out a sweet podcast into the world every week out of my own pocket. So I will be undyingly grateful if you support me and my biz financially in any of these ways. And if you like, I'll even give you a mental BJ with my mind from the lounge itself. Saucy. And I'll pop the links in the show notes. Thank you. Later. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for this chat today. I've learned heaps. I feel freshly inspired and motivated to tackle this fascia business. I think I'm long
I'm happy
overdue.
if it's appropriate to give a free gift to everybody so they can start to feel this right away.
Yeah.
It's a 9-class series using a rolled up towel, and they just will give you the link. They can get it. They can feel it for themselves immediately. And if you resonate with what we share with you, then you're going to love the actual program. If it's not for you, you'll know. And it's there for you to give it a try.
Awesome. That would be wonderful. I'm definitely going to give that a go. I'll get the link off you and I'll put it in the show notes and in the Labia Lounge Facebook group for people. But thank you so much. This has been a really cool chat.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
And that's it, darling hearts. Thanks for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. If you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch, because that's a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism, and you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify, and destigmatize with this here podcast. I'm also always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, questions or guest suggestions, so feel free to get in touch via my website or over on Insta. You can also send me in TMI stories to be shared anonymously on the pod. My handle is FreyaGraf_the Labia Lounge, if my account hasn't been deleted for being too sex positive, which, is always a possibility with censorship. But just in case the chronic censorship finally does obliterate my social channels, I'd highly recommend going and joining my mailing list and snagging yourself some fun freebies for the trouble at www.freyagraf.com/freebies. Anyway, later, labial legends. See you next time.